Yesterday, the Ethics Commissioner released the Trudeau report that examined the Prime Minister's role in the SNC-Lavalin scandal. And this report, this is the second report from the Ethics Commissioner on Trudeau, which found that he had breached the Conflict of Interest Act. Many constituents talked to me about this yesterday. I was out door knocking in the evening, and a lot of constituents had questions or comments about this latest report from the Ethics Commissioner on Trudeau. So I thought I'd take a few moments and talk about it. Much has already been said and written about what the Prime Minister did, about his role and how he put inappropriate pressure on the Attorney General to interfere in the prosecution of the criminal prosecution of SNC-Lavalin. But I'm going to just focus on a couple of other elements that were contained in the report. And one of them in particular is the aspect of cover-up. We've seen how witnesses have been unable to testify about any events that happened after January 14th. And the commissioner said, quote, "During this examination, 9 witnesses informed our office that they had information they believed to be relevant, but that could not be disclosed. According to them, this information would reveal confidence of the Queen's Privy Council and would fall outside the scope of Order in Council 2019-0105. So, in other words, the cover-up is actually continuing. We have 9 witnesses with relevant information who are legally prevented from testifying. For any historian of Watergate, we know the cover-up is often worse than the crime, or it certainly exacerbates the crime, and the cover-up on this continues. What do these 9 witnesses have to say? What happened after January 14th? Jody Wilson-Raybould and Jane Philpott have both said that they have more information that they are not legally able to disclose. So the Prime Minister is continuing to suppress witnesses from testifying. So that's one element that I want to talk about. The other thing that is very clear in this report, and had perhaps not been quite as reported earlier on, is just how cozy the relationship between SNC-Lavalin and the Liberal government, including the Minister of Finance and the Department of Finance. We see from this report that at the Davos Forum, we've got the head of SNC-Lavalin chatting with the Minister of Finance, Bill Morneau, about how they're going to get SNC-Lavalin off the hook. We saw that right from the very beginning of this government's mandate, how they began talking with SNC-Lavalin about how to get them off the hook through perhaps deferred prosecution agreements, which were snuck into the Budget Implementation Act of 2018. Now, I was at the Finance Committee when this was discussed, and there were Liberal members of that committee who were actually scratching their head and wondering what deferred prosecutions were doing inside a Budget Implementation Act. And it's very clear now what they were doing there. This is what SNC-Lavalin wanted them to do, and this was the strategy to get this Liberal-connected company off the hook for bribery and corruption. So the coziness and relationship between powerful Liberal-connected companies and the Prime Minister and his Finance Minister is quite disturbing. And so we saw back in March, Conservative leader Andrew Scheer was right off the mark and calling for Trudeau's resignation. He was absolutely right to do so. Trudeau was absolutely wrong to refuse and to stay and cling on to power. There would have been perhaps, I guess, some honor in his resignation back then, but we are far too late for that now. At this point, Canadians have to realize that this government, if it is re-elected, will actually be receiving a mandate for corruption. And the sleaze and the corporate coziness that we saw that led to the SNC-Lavalin scandal would only be further encouraged and further sanctioned if this Liberal government is allowed to continue. So I 100% agree with our leader. The Prime Minister Trudeau should have resigned. Andrew Scheer was right. We need to have a government in Canada that will actually look after the interests of Canadians and not their corporate friends and not to also cover up the wrongdoing of its prime minister.